Hey guys, Bill here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how I prepare for a trading day and build a watch list. This is a process that probably takes me about 1 to 2 hours on average each day, so I'm not going to sit here for that long because I doubt anyone wants to watch a video that takes that long. I'm going to touch on some of the important parts of my process and kind of just give an overview of the different things I go through. And it's going to be pretty heavy with tradie ticks. So if you don't have that, I apologize. I do think it's something worth checking out. I think they have a few days free trial. If not, try it out for a month. But there's a lot of other services that offer some of the similar information that I'm going to be using. And then also there's some ways to get some of this information and do some of these scans for free as well. So I think it'll help you even if you're not a Tradie Ticks subscriber. But yeah, so let's jump into how I sort of get going and start doing my selection process, all right? The first thing I'm going to do is use the Tradie Ticks stock market summary. And this is just going to give you kind of a after-day overview of what happened in the stock market. So you can see that we have had a bearish day with direction. Of the indexes, the one that got hammered the least was the Dow. Hottest sector, so hot, relatively hot. Healthcare wasn't completely beaten down like some of the other sectors. And you have your little heat map here, quite red. Biggest gainers, biggest losers. So what I do with these is, sometimes you can start to see some stock patterns. Like for instance, in the gainers here, lots of banks, right? So banks were hot Friday. Boeing, some airlines were hot as well. Travel names. A lot of that is due to the oil dumping. When oil dumps, travel gets a bump. Okay, so, gas prices and all that. Biggest losers, Rivian, Square, Tesla. Tesla continues to just get hit super hard. Other EVs and kind of growth tech names hurting with that. Let's see, Kroger and Albertsons, there was talk of like a merger, so those both got hit hard. But yeah, Tesla and EVs, they've been hurting, and that continued Friday. Down here, they'll show some sector rotations. Pretty much everything was down relatively. And sector performance here, what got hit the worst? Consumer discretionary, energy, and what was kind of hanging in there better, financials, communication services. So, here I'm just kind of building something to keep in my mind. What sectors were stronger, what were weaker, what types of names had good days, what types of names had notably bad days, this type of stuff. All right. Then I'm going to the options overview. And this is one I use a lot, okay? So here's your market net flow. I have a video on what this is if you're curious. But you see here, we started the day off a little bullish, and then we crossed bearish and never really looked back, and ended the day with a really big divergence in puts to calls. So that starts to get me thinking, okay, well, Monday, it's more likely that we're probably going to see some more downside, but there's no guarantees, and I don't want to have too much of a bias heading into any trading day. But DEX, which is, the daily sum of deltas, also put in a really big red candle, which is not a great sign. That doesn't mean we can't have a green day Monday, but it's just something to get me maybe a little more interested in looking at some downside plays, or at least some plays that are kind of in a do or die scenario where maybe they're at support and they could get a bounce, or if they fall through that support, there's a lot more downside coming. So I'll have my eyes out open for a couple of plays like that. And then scrolling down here, I pay a lot of attention to the daily top options flow. Here's weekly over here, daily. And I like to start looking at names that have big days. So ARC is going to catch my attention. I'll be putting that into a watch list. And to kind of give you an explanation of how I start to build this out, it's sort of like, if you're familiar with sports at all, like the March Madness college basketball tournament. So in that tournament, there's Selection Sunday, and a big pool of teams is picked out of the hundreds of teams in the country. They take like 68 teams, and they are picked, and then they play single elimination until there's a champion, or a Final Four. That's a very popular part of the tournament. I'm going to be doing kind of the same thing with stocks. So I'm going to be scrolling through all these different data analysis pages, different scans, and anything that catches my eye just for even one reason, I kind of throw into a watch list. And that's sort of like my first pool. And then I'm going to let these stocks compete. And what I want is for a few of them to stand out because they have multiple reasons for me to be interested in them. All right. So maybe something's an inside bar and it had high relative volume and there was a bullish algo flow divergence. All right. So that would be like 3 reasons I'd really like that setup. Or maybe I noticed on the chart there was a hammer candle and it was off major fib support. And then there was like notable call buying or flow. Okay. I want these tickers to show me multiple reasons to get into the to be interested in the setup. All right. So here's, part 1. So we like ARC, big flow, call flow. RCL, big call flow. What else? So Oxy's in there, some oil names. C, we know the banks were kind of hot. And then on negative flow, we have Apple, Amazon, Tesla. Of course, Tesla's been getting hammered for not weeks, but several days now, almost 2 weeks. FXI I'm not that familiar with, but we'll pull that in to see what that's all about. And then they kind of break them down here in different types of flow. So like highest call volume and highest put volume changes are relative to the last 7 days. We see Snap, FXI again. So FXI is showing up. We're looking for things that might be showing up multiple times on here too, just to sort of see if something keeps repeating in different categories. It's probably worth looking at. All right, puts. Some banks, interesting. Rivian that we noticed was a big loser from Friday, so that makes sense. Let's see. Banks, more banks. Snap again. So this is for premiums increase. So Snap was in there for volume, call volume and premium change. OI changed silver. Some of this stuff I just don't really ever trade. So like silver and certain different indexes and things like that, I'm not going to really ever look at. And that's kind of part of the process too. The longer you do this, the more you start to realize what types of stocks you like to trade and which type you don't. I pretty much have a 50 or 60 stock watch list of things I'm going to look at on a monthly basis. And if, I see names that aren't necessarily in there, it's not because I'm don't care about ever looking at them, but maybe I have in the past and I've realized something like they have super low contract volume, they're spready. So I just, from now on, I just kind of ignore them. So if you see me skipping over stuff, it's not out of haste really. It's more out of just knowing what I like to trade and what I don't like to trade. Down here, there's also different types of contracts and things to look at, like cheaplies, leaps, and large out the money open interest and most out the money strikes. Here's Snap again. Okay. So now Snap is already kind of moving up in my mind here as something I definitely want to check out because it's getting all this positive flow, bullish flow. And now people are buying out the money strikes too, which shows that they're confident. And it's a week expiry, right? Weekly next week. So that shows a lot of confidence. Okay. Large out the monies. These are almost always like your indexes and then the big guys like Tesla, so Apple, Netflix. So you don't learn a whole lot looking at that usually. But I keep this page open because, I want to be able to reference it later. It's impossible to remember every ticker that you looked at and what their flow was like and everything like that. Then I'm going to start doing some scans. Okay. So if you guys have followed my content for a while, I love inside bar plays. So the first thing I'm going to do is scan for those. All right. And there's lots of ways you can kind of filter by volume, by market cap, and all that good stuff. And it looks like there was quite a few inside bar plays, 96. I just usually filter by volume right away. I have a video on how I kind of do all this inside bar stuff too, so I don't want to talk too much about that. But AMD, F, XLE, Plug, Moo, ZOM. Okay, so there's a little bit of a theme here. A lot of the oil names are inside bars. The indexes MRO, there's another one. So we're probably going to want to look at least one oil name. They're consolidating that might be ready for a break down more or maybe a move back up. Twitter, QCOM. So, when I'm going through these lists, I'm pretty much just looking for Upstart, okay, and SMH, the semiconductor ETF. I'm looking for names I'm familiar with and things I know I like to trade. I also will kind of look at their relative volume. BB has had a lot of relative volume Friday. Relative strength can be a good one too. Twitter's had great relative strength with the Elon thing going on. They're keeping it up there, pinned near his buy-in level. So that's one to keep in mind. And then, so I'm pulling all these tickers in, and the watch list is getting bigger and bigger. And then another scan I like to do, if we clear all this stuff, is on TradyTix you're able to create a watch list, and I just throw in like 50 or 60 stocks that I normally like to trade. And then I can really easily get an idea of how all these stocks that I like perform. So I can do things like, wow, look at Piton down 17%, and Rivian, which we talked about earlier. I can look at how things performed the day before. Not a whole lot of green on the board Friday, but there's the airlines. Delta had a good day. They had earnings recently that were good. So they stayed strong, and American Airlines is there with them, and other travel names like CCL. And also, like I said, oil was down pretty bad Friday, and that does help the travel names. Banks were looking good. We had WFC there, BAC. BAC has earnings pre-market Monday, I believe. So that's, something you could be looking at. And same thing I did on the inside bar scan. Let's look at some relative volume. Kroger. Relative volume, it got killed because of that Albertsons merger news. Relative strength, Twitter, Mo. And you can do relative weakness too, So maybe if you're watching a stock and it's at support and you're wondering how likely it is it could break down, well, if it has a really low relative strength, it's more likely to break down. And we see NEO here leading the way. It's been getting hit hard. Tesla's probably dragging it down too. So all these things I'm kind of just processing. I'm keeping them in mind. I'm dragging over names to my watch lists. Another thing I look for is divergences. And to do that, you use the Flash scanner, which is on TradyTix. And optionable, divergences, algo flow. I have a video on this as well. And I'm just kind of coming through these names and looking. SoFi has a bullish divergence. A lot of stuff has bullish divergences. Also, I usually select my watch list too, so I'm not getting a bunch of results from names I have no interest in. Chewy. There's SMH. So we saw earlier SMH was an inside bar. It also has this bullish divergence. It's best if you see something with 1 and 5 day. So like well, that's 1 day twice. They just had 2 different alerts for it. Meta, banks, SMH is in here twice, both 1 days. So what I do at that point is I take some of these names and I bring them into the options tracker dashboard. And that's where you can get like the individual algo flow and net flow and things like that for any ticker. And you pull them in and you just kind of double check. One thing you want to double check with divergences, let's just look at SoFi, I guess. You want to make sure that, like, especially at the end of a week, like it was Friday, if you see a bullish divergence, sometimes that can be created by simply like puts being sold because people are taking profit at the end of the day. That's not the case here with SoFi. As you can see, it's actually call buying that went up, even though we did taper off into close. Like no one was touching puts, buying calls. So we got a little bit of a bullish divergence there. So that could be something to keep an eye on. And so I go through all that. And then there's also this other tool called OpenTra, which will just show you like which contracts were getting hit the hardest. So hottest call chains and put chains. So SPX, obviously, I mean, the volume on that's going to be crazy. So that's kind of always up there. But Twitter, So now we're hearing Twitter again. Zom, Exxon, Mobil, hearing that again. Amazon. And when you use this, you want to make sure that your net premiums, because your calls are green. Otherwise, it means it's call selling, and that's actually bearish. So Netflix and these names, Disney, Square, AMD, bearish. AMD was an inside bar. But then SMH, the semiconductor ETF, was getting call flow and a bullish divergence. So, you want to look into all this stuff and make sure that, just because one thing starts to make you believe that maybe this is bullish, let's look at the whole picture here. Because look at puts. Moo, AMD, puts. So that's starting to make me think that the semis, like the semi ETF, probably not as bullish as maybe it looks like. And there's ways to go in and check all that stuff. And anytime I'm kind of looking at contract flow, this does a good job of telling you the net premiums. But maybe if you're looking at like the individual names like this, and sometimes it'll tell you the flow is bullish or bearish or whatever. And it can be a little misleading, so you want to go in and check the live options flow. And I like to infer the buy or sell. That's just going to help you easily see if these calls are being bought or sold. I take non-spreads because spreads are used to hedge, and we don't want to be confused by that information that's going to make it harder for us to figure out the actual intent of these buyers and sellers. And then you put in, say, something like SoFi, okay, and it does come up bearish, or bullish, sorry, and that's good. You want it to match across these different pages. And another thing you can do, especially if you're day trading, it can help to be short expiry out the money. So even once we do that, it's still bullish. They sold some puts here, bought some calls there. And I go through and I do this with like every ticker, okay? And then now I have a bunch of tickers in my watch list, okay? So maybe like 15 to 20. And at this point, I'm going through every chart and looking for other reasons to take the trade. This is the good old-fashioned, look at your chart, look at your levels. Are there candlestick patterns? Are there trend tests? Are we on a key fib level? Any type of daily or, something support or resistance? Anything like that. See, now I like this. That's AAL. Coming up, tested the trend line on the daily, rejected it. Now, what's interesting with AAL is we had bearish flow in algo, I believe. This is where I start to just go through every ticker that I liked for any reason. I run through this options dashboard, and I check out the flow and the algo flow, and I can come down and check out the net flow as well, and just kind of see what's up. So, sometimes I might think, oh, the chart looks bullish or it looks bearish, and I come in here and see if it agrees, see if the data agrees. So we're looking at the chart. That does look pretty bearish, right? I mean, we've rejected this trend line several times, once for a huge move down over a few days, and here we are rejecting. But then you think to yourself, well, the airlines were hot Friday, okay? So it's something to keep in mind. This might not be the easiest name to short. If oil continues to drop, it's going to help strengthen the airlines. Delta just had earnings and it was positive, so it figures that maybe American also is going to have good earnings. So I'm trying to find plays where there's lots of agreement between different data points and the chart and any type of catalyst and things like this. Speaking of catalysts, one other thing I look at is this calendar made by the Anonymous Prophet. This person's great, and they put this out every Sunday. And it's a list of different catalysts. A lot of times it's just earnings, but there's also different events. And, like companies go and present things somewhere, or they have some type of thing going on that's going to help maybe bring interest into the company, increase option volume. And also, a lot of times at these events, they release news, and we know how news can drive a stock up or down. So I kind of look at these. Obviously, the next day I'm paying special attention to, but I'll also, be looking at the different names on here. So Netflix, and had shown up a couple times in our scans, and they have earnings coming up. Plug had shown up in some of our scans. It was an inside bar. And now we see on Wednesday they are hosting a symposium, and there's an expected price move of 13%. So that's great, all right? So maybe there's a run up to that, or maybe it's more, helpful on Wednesday, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Tesla, we've been talking about. They have earnings coming up. Snap, ooh, great. So Snap has earnings coming up, and we've talked about them a lot. They showed up on a lot of the scans. There's American, they have earnings. So this is great to know, all right? So we're starting to see some names that we might be interested in here. Snap, Tesla, Plug, that have shown up quite a few places. So that's good. And now we're just going through. AMD was an inside bar. ARC, let's see what's up with ARC. ARC's at a key, very key, resistance here. Support, sorry. 33 on ARC, going all the way back to COVID lows in March of 2020. It's coming down here. So this is going to be a really important spot for ARC to either bounce or die. And obviously if it bounces, we've got plenty of room back up. If it dies, it's pretty important because it hasn't been below this level in 2 years. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's also, that's a nasty candle. Let's check out ARC here. Okay, so on the 1 day, it's bearish. Algo. It's got bullish overall flow and bullish on the 5 day. Okay, so it's kind of like it's not a clear direction of where it's going to go, which isn't always a bad thing because now it's maybe a good two-way op, right? Let's dig into the actual flow a little bit. Yeah, it says bullish flow, and it is, especially for short expiry and out the money. You change that and it's bearish. That's why it's cool to look at all these different kind of like time frames and things like this. So what this is telling me is people that are taking longer out bets, like out here in January of next year, they're bearish. But people who are taking shorter expiry, like for next week, and especially if it's out the money, they're more bullish. So maybe the market's thinking, okay, we're probably going to bounce here at this 33. It's really strong support. The last couple of times we've even gotten near it, we've bounced back up, and we definitely bounced big time there and went to, all-time highs off of it and COVID. So it's an important level. So this is a setup now that has my attention for a handful of reasons. So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. BAC. Wow, that's a nasty hammer candle. Gravestone Doji, off a trend line. So this is another two-way, thing because, like we talked about, you look at the chart, that's very bearish. You think about what's going on in the market. Banks were strong Friday. BAC has earnings coming up, so you never know. It's kind of like another good two-way op. So I'm starting to see this picture of the market for Monday being full of a lot of things that kind of have potential to go either way. And I'm not going to get too ahead of myself thinking like we're going to tank tomorrow or we're going to rally tomorrow. It's more so that I think there's going to be a lot of really good two-way setups. So I'm looking at my inside bars. Speaking of which, Plug. We saw that there's a catalyst coming up for Plug. It was an inside bar. I'm kind of, it put in a kind of a nasty little inverted hammer there. It's approaching this gap level. Yeah, this huge gap from the 28th fills below here. And then there's a key fib, the 786 fib of this uptrend. That's the last part of the golden zone. That's going to be good support. It'd also be a great target. You know, if this inside bar triggers to the downside, then you're looking at first filling this gap and then testing this fib. And that would be a good trade on plug. You know, it trades at a low value. That little move here from, you know, 1780 down to 1674, that dollar move would make you quite a bit of money on puts, you know, 50% easily. So I like plug. Okay. Let's check out the option summary on plug. And there's your two-way there's your two-way setup. Bullish flow, bullish algo flow with a huge divergence on the 1 day, but bearish on the 5. So let's see, that's the net flow. Yeah, big time call buying into close. Okay, so that's the reason for this. So there might be people out there, you know, for whatever reason, they think plug's gonna rally. Like bounced really hard off this area Thursday and then rejected back Friday. It's an inside bar. Those are inherently good two-way setups, right? You've got your high of day and your low of day, and once it breaks that, you're looking for continuation. So I love it. Big, nice relative volume on plug too. You know, that's one of their highest volume days going back to August. So that's interesting. Tesla, I know we saw popping up a lot. It's been getting hammered. And this is kind of the ultimate, you know, bounce or die play, two-way play. It's coming down here to 200 psych, right? It's as low as it's been in a while. It's put in all these red days in a row. It's got a double outside day, an outside reversal day. I mean, it is about as bearish as you can get. But at the same time, 200 psych, beaten down quite a bit. If something's going to bounce, it could be Tesla. So this is another example of a great maybe two-way op. So not every day is it going to be where you're looking at a lot of all upside plays or all downside plays. You might want to look at some plays that have potential to do, you know, both things. So you're not, you know, getting yourself into too many positions on one side and the market decides to do the opposite that day and you take a huge loss because you were really certain that it was going to do what you thought it would do. All right. So it's best to be prepared for both scenarios at all times. Twitter, we talked about had a lot of relative strength lately. It was bear or bull flagging for quite a bit and kind of broke out the other day. And now it's another inside bar here, but it has closed up over this major 50 fib from COVID, which can be interesting. 54.20 is Elon's price, so there's a little bit of room left up here to get there. Just something I don't know if I want to keep, you know, trying to trade every day because just there's no range right now with Twitter. Snap, this is one we need to look at because we saw how many times it kept showing up on our scans and in the flow data and all that. So, you know, we have the earnings coming up. It put in a pretty nasty candle Friday like most things did. Let's check out Snap here. Bullish flow. Well, that's a big divergence. Okay. So now I'm interested. And yeah, so, you know, a lot of this flow is maybe, it's not too far out. This is November, so that's not too bad. And there's a decent amount of flow for next week. There's this huge put order out there for December. Net flow, nice call buying spike end of day, but puts were kind of coming up too. But that's a pretty good looking bullish algo divergence on the 1 day. On the 5, more bearish. So again, nice little two-way up. And, you know, if you're just looking at the chart, Snap's sitting on pretty decent support. So I can see why there'd be some short-term bullish divergence in the algo. This 10 psych is, look at how we struggled with it here and then finally broke over it and held it and made a huge run back up to almost 13. Came back down and tested it again, made another run back up to 13. Came down here, tested it, small bounce, and eventually failed. But as soon as we failed, we put in one of the nastiest, long, big wick energy candles you've seen. And then another run back up to 12. So here we are. What is this? Almost quadruple bottom again. And even though they've been trying to flush it under 10, it keeps closing over it. So this is a very interesting play for me. I think it's going to be one of my top watches based on that bullish flow we've seen, bullish algo divergence on this major support that's served us well in the past on bounces. Okay? Snap. I like it. We also kind of wanted to look at some oil names, right? Because a bunch of them are inside bars. And the sector kind of got hit hard on Friday. And inside bars are great. Like I've said, they're great two-way setups. So here we have MRO. A lot of consolidation in this zone of its yesterday's high and low, which are your natural inside bar triggers. It's been trading in that now for several sessions. So a move could be coming. I like that. Let's check out the flow in the algo. There was a big divergence during the day and it all died off. But people kept buying calls. Interesting. It says bearish algo and bearish overall flow, but there's a bullish divergence on the 5-day. And, wait, that's strange. There's a bullish divergence on the 1 and 5 minute. Yeah, okay, but it says algo flow is bearish. That's a little weird. Let's check out the flow on here and kind of dig in more. Not much going on really, but it is bearish. But a lot of the call buying is far dated out. April of next year. Okay. Shorter term, they're selling calls. So that's most of the reason that you're going to be, especially this big order here, this call sell order for January 2023. Okay, so the flow's not telling me a ton, but I like the inside bar setup. It's interesting to me that all the oil names kind of had inside bar setups, so that's cool. And then one other name I wanted to check out because I've never really looked at it too much is this FXI. It came up in a lot of the call flow scans, and it looks like that's because it's just really beaten down. $23.78. So it hasn't been down this low since 2011. And let's check that out. FXI. Bearish flow, bullish divergence on the 1 day. Quite a big one. And a big one on the 5-day. And a lot of call buying into close. So my guess is they see how low this thing's gotten, reaching 11-year lows, and they're looking for a bounce. It could be worth it keeping an eye on because, yeah, see, look at this. 25.5 strike, 43,000 volume. So that's interesting. I've never traded this before. Had the nasty candle like pretty much everything did. It's got so much room up, obviously, because it's about at 11-year lows. Look at all these gaps, just gap, gap, gap. It could be a runner, And another thing, you kind of notice a little bit is the bigger volume days the last few weeks are bullish. Big day there. I mean, that, that's a big red day, but then you get even a bigger green day. Biggest green day of the last couple of weeks is here, or last week is here, green. That's interesting. All right, so I like this. I'm going to keep an eye on it, even though I've never really traded it before. And that's sort of, got me down to now I'm kind of like looking at 4 or 5 names. I like ARK and Snap a lot because they're both 2 names that are at major support and they're getting some, positive flow in. Tesla, same thing. A lot of the growth names. So, with ARK there, it makes sense. This FXI, kind of another similar idea, bounce or die setup. MRO with the oil names, a lot of inside bars. I love playing the inside bars. Plug for the same reason, inside bar. Really nice relative volume. And I'll also keep an eye on American because I love the chart setup as far as the rejection of the trend line, but then it also has the earnings and things like this. It could be another good two-way op if it breaks out, or if it has bad earnings, it's in a very good position to just kind of fade back down to this COVID 786 level. But yeah, guys, that's really how I go about, kind of looking at a ton of tickers and then whittling it down to 4 or 5 that I really like to keep my focus on for the next day. That way I can really watch the charts all day and kind of what I call stalk the price action instead of having screens up with 25 things open and alerts going off nonstop and distracting me. And I feel like I'm kind of going crazy and chasing a bunch of things and trying to hop in plays. I'm being patient. I'm watching. I have a plan and I'm waiting for the stock to come to me and then I take the play. All right. If you have any questions about anything I talked about in this video, just let me know, hit me up, leave some comments, whatever. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I appreciate it and have a good night.